Okay, so you're all refreshed, you have your coffee, you're all wide awake. That's great. Joel asked me to make an announcement about his book on believer's baptism. That if you're willing to leave a review, write a review for his book on wherever it would be, social media, he can explain where. He's willing to give you a free access to, I think it's the Kindle or one of those online books that you would be able to read. So if you are willing to do that, talk to Joel. He'll explain more about that. But he'll give you an ebook free for a review that you would be willing to give for him. Okay. Thank you. Let me go through. I have a number of questions here, and I'm going to just go through them as they came in. So the first one that came in, if I can open them up, there we go. Why is it not opening? Here we go. All right. As a Gen Z leader in my church, I've discovered that there are many leaders that simply don't know that there are young people desperately looking to be spiritually mothered and fathered. How can I, as a young person, honor and encourage these leaders to impart to our generation and share their legacy in faith with us?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, honestly, just having a conversation and asking them to do that would be the best way. I think for a lot of older people, we kind of feel like we have something to offer, but we're not sure anybody wants to hear it. And so when a young person comes and says, hey, I really want to hear this from you, or ask questions or whatever, it's like, okay, great. Most people are willing to do that. They just want to be asked. They don't want to assume that they should tell a bunch of stuff. So, yeah, that would be my response to that.
I liked your encouragement to tell our story, and that's part of it, which she's sharing here in that way. My daughter, who's actually here, did something for my wife and I. One Christmas, she gave us a book, and it is a book where you're supposed to write your story. And it has a lot of questions, tell me about your early childhood, tell me about this, because they want to capture our stories.
Yeah.
So there's actually a book out there to guide you for us as parents. Then we can pass it on to our children, and they can pass it on to their children. I would love to have one of those from my grandfather. Mm-hmm. I don't know his story, so that would be something great that we can pass on. Okay.
There's an app, too, where you can just speak it into the phone, and that it transcribes it for you.
Wow.
Yeah.
It gets easier and easier.
Yeah.
Question. What would be your suggestion or recommendation for the process of stepping into another level of identity in Christ?
There's so much. I think there's lots of different things that can help with that. For me, where God has done the most work in my life on identity is during sabbatical seasons, because I'm not doing all the things. I'm just being rather than doing, so he can get to that core identity stuff. When you're in a sabbatical or a time away even, you don't really have a title, you don't have a position, you're not in charge of anything. So it allows you kind of set all the other stuff aside so you can just be a son or a daughter, and he can speak to you about that. That's one thing. There's a book that my wife read and then I read called Self to Lose, Self to Find, that is really, really great on identity. So if you're a reader, it's a great book. The first half is all about identity, and the second half is all about the Enneagram, if you're interested in that at all. And it really helped me understand a lot more things about myself that I didn't, which was super helpful. So those are a couple things I would say right off the top.
Next question. Is there such a thing as sharing my story too much?
Yes.
Talking about self too much?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, if you're talking about yourself all the time, yeah, nobody wants to hang out with you. But I think if you're asking questions along the way and then, asking people to share their story too, it works, to share some of your stuff and make it about them as well. I try to go like 25% about me, 75% about them. That's kind of my metric that I aim for in a conversation, especially with a person I'm investing in. Because I could spend the entire time talking, but that's not helpful for people. You need to hear their story too. In fact, I would say it this way: if I don't know your story, it's pretty hard for me to help you. It's hard for me to even know what to talk about, what to invest in. So I try to kind of go with that scale. About 75%, I want to be asking questions, hearing from them, and I'm about 25% sharing back with them in a one-on-one situation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another. I'm so excited for the upcoming generation. How do we keep them engaged and hand things over and still honor our more mature congregants?
So in a church setting, it can become so much about the next generation that the older people feel left out, right, or whatever. It just doesn't have to be that way. There's so much to do. There's so many opportunities, and creating spaces and places and opportunities for all the generations to do things it's not that hard to do. But there is a very specific thing with the younger generations where you've got to invite them in, because again, if they're healthy at all, they're not going to push you out of the way. So you've got to make space for them intentionally. That doesn't mean that older generations aren't important or aren't valued or don't have a space. It just means you've got to be intentional about inviting and releasing them and giving them opportunities. So I think there's plenty of room for everybody in the kingdom and opportunities. So you might want to speak to that too, Lester.
It's a challenge. There's a tension that you feel sometimes with that. Mm-hmm. We started off as all pretty much young people as the church started. Most of all us just had young kids and things like that. But we have aged.
Yep.
And from time to time, I do hear from my generation saying, "Don't forget about us. We're still here." Uh-huh. And because a lot of focus can be on the younger generation, which in some ways I think it should. But don't forget about the rest of us.
Yeah. There's plenty to do.
Right.
There's plenty of opportunities. So making space for everybody, I think, is vitally important.
Maybe this ties into it a little bit. How do you know when a young leader is ready?
Ready. What does ready mean? I hear that a lot. I don't know if they're ready. Well, what do you exactly mean by that? You don't know if you like them, or you don't know if you agree with everything they agree with, or what? I think for me, when I'm wanting to release somebody into leadership, I learned this from Bill Hybels many years ago, who I know has been controversial of late, but whatever. It's still true. I'm looking for three things: character, chemistry, and competence. Character, chemistry, and competence. Character, and sometimes when you say character, like the person's got to have character, people automatically go to, oh, well, they've basically The grid is basically they've got to be perfect almost, and that's not what I mean at all by character. Character to me means, are you growing? Like, are you growing? Are you recognizing that you don't have everything that you need? Like, if I have a young leader that's coming up and they're super prideful and they won't take feedback, I'm not going to release them to the next thing. Because if I can't give you feedback, if you're not teachable, you're not going to be usable. You can't grow if you're not teachable. So I'm looking for that character that says, okay, I'm going to do everything I can with as much integrity as I can, but obviously I'm going to make plenty of mistakes. But when you make a mistake, not if, when, are you willing to admit that you made a mistake? Are you willing to own your part? Are you willing to receive feedback? Because if every time I give you feedback, you bow up and get all angry about it or upset, or I've had other people, every time you give them feedback, they just turn into a puddle of goo. You know, you can't even talk to them. Well, how could you say that to me? And I'm like, because you're a leader. You have to take feedback. We all have blind spots. And we know why they're called blind spots, right? Because you can't see them. I have blind spots. I don't know what they are, but I have them. And I need other people to speak into my life to help me see those blind spots. So if any leader, but certainly an up-and-coming leader, any leader who can't receive feedback, I can't give you anything of substance, of significance, because I can't trust you. And trust is the foundation of relationship, and trust is the currency of leadership. So if I can't trust you, how are the people I'm going to put you in charge of going to trust you? And the only way you really build trust is by being a person who's really honest and has integrity and receives feedback and is willing to admit when they make mistakes and own their stuff. And so I'm okay with people making mistakes. In fact, I tell our staff sometimes, if you don't ever make any mistakes, you're not doing anything. So you're going to make some mistakes. I just don't want you to make the same mistake over and over and over again. You keep making the same mistake over and over and over again, that means you're not growing, which is a sign of character. People of character grow. They grow because they're willing to own their mistakes and take feedback and develop and move forward. Does that make sense what I'm saying? So that's character. And then chemistry. Is there a chemistry? Do I have any connection with you? If every time I walk into a room with somebody on my team, it feels awkward and weird, something's off. And sometimes people will say, well, you need to put people on your team like that who are going to grow your character. I got plenty of opportunities to grow my character. I don't need to add unnecessary pain into my life of someone who I just don't connect with. I have no relational chemistry with at all. I'm not going to ask that person onto my team. Now, I might give them a leadership role doing something else with some other people who connect with them, but I'm not going to invite them onto my team. So character, chemistry, competence. Do they have an ability to do some of the things that they need to do to lead at this level? And the reason competence is last is not because it's not important, but it's because most competencies you can teach. You can train competency. Now, there's certain things you can't, like you don't want me to be the worship leader up here because I'm not a singer. And you can't train me to be a singer. I mean, that's just not my thing, right? So there's certain things you can't, but most competencies, like communication, you can learn to be a good communicator. You can teach people to communicate well. They may not be great, but they can be sufficient at it and communicate well. You can teach people how to organize things. You can teach people how to lead a meeting. All competencies can be taught, but character and chemistry, I got to see that. And sometimes character means we're going to have some really, really hard conversations, and I'm going to see how you're going to respond to that. And that's going to tell me whether you're growing in character or not. And you may respond really poorly, and I realize, I can't release much to you. And then later, we have another round, and I check it out and see if you've grown. So I could release some more to you in that. So character, chemistry, competence, that's what I'm looking for. And when I see those three things, man, I'm like, man, we can do anything together. You know, those three things are there, we're rocking and rolling. And so I hope that answers the question. If anybody has a follow-up, I'm happy to talk more about that, because this is a really big deal.
This question might be like a follow-up question. What are the three most important things for those transitioning into a leadership role successfully?
Can you read it again?
What are the three most important? I will when I get this figured out.
Yeah.
Here we go. What are the three most important things for those transitioning into a leadership role successfully?
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned three: competency and character,
Chemistry.
chemistry.
Yeah. Those are really important. But as far as that person, like, I'm assuming you're meaning like if a leader's transitioning out and you're transitioning in, what's important for this person transitioning in? Those things are really important. I mean, the character thing is really, really important. Anytime you're going to step into a position of leadership, you've got to be able and willing to hear from people who are trying to help you grow. If you're not, you become the emperor with no clothes. You guys know that famous fable. That's where you end up if you're not able to hear feedback from people who are, quote unquote, under you, who you're leading. If you can't hear feedback from them and really receive it, you're stuck. You're stuck with who you are and where you are, and you need to be able to hear that to be able to keep growing as a leader. I just think that's vitally important. I would say the other thing is, if you're coming in, like you're the person transitioning in, if you don't have a heart to honor the previous generation, you're going to lose honor from the generation coming after you. You reap what you sow. So if you're sowing honor, you're going to reap honor. If you're sowing discord, you're going to reap discord. That's just what's going to happen. So if you're coming in behind, how can I honor the next generation? The generation before me? How can I honor those who have gone ahead of me? And there's things that they establish that I don't even have to think about. It's already established. They've already fought those battles. What are some of those? You know, how can I honor that and thank them for that and say in front of other people, man, thank you so much for doing this and this and this. That made a way for us to be able to step in. That's huge. And what it does then also for you, it gives you credibility with the people, because they love the person going out too. They may love you as well, but they love the person going out. And when you're able to genuinely honor that previous generation, your people are like, man, this is so great. This is such a healthy place. I want to be here. I want to be here. You know what I mean? This is the kind of leaders I want to follow, because they know how to honor. And I cannot express strongly enough how important that is for you to have credibility as an incoming leader, to honor the previous generation. It's vitally important. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, that's really good. How do you know as a leader when it's time to transition? That's my question. I'm going to put him on the spot.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, there's no magic formula, right? Otherwise, we would all do it at the right time. There's not a magic formula. I think there are some things, and I want Lester to speak to this as well, that are indicators for us that it's getting to be time. You know, you're moving toward that time. Like, one of the ways I like to say it is the grace is running out. The grace is running thin. you know? You're starting to realize, yeah, these meetings I used to sit in and get really energized by, I'm just like, can I please get out of here? Can I get out? You know, that's probably a good indication that you either need a sabbatical or you need to transition, one or the other. If you're experiencing the grace running thin, and you're not sure, I highly recommend going on a sabbatical, an extended sabbatical, because part of what that does for you is it helps you evaluate, is this time? Am I moving toward the time for transition? Because sometimes you go on sabbatical and you come back and all of a sudden you got all this new energy, this new, new grace, and you're good to go. And you can keep going forward. Sometimes you go on sabbatical and you come back and you're like, yeah, I'm not sure I really want to end this sabbatical. I'd like to just stay out there, And so it just helps in the discernment process, but it also helps your people and your leadership team realize that they can make it without you, which is a good thing. Some of you might be like, is that a good thing? It's a good thing. They can make it without you. You're not the Messiah. Just in case you don't know that. You're not the Messiah. I'm not the Messiah. None of us are. Only Jesus is. So you're not the be-all, end-all. And when you go on an extended sabbatical, your people start to realize, oh my God, well, hey, we're still here. We made it. We're still functioning. We're still alive. And that's a good thing because remember, it's not yours. And the more stable, the more healthy your organization is, the more sustainable it's going to be without you. So, and that speaks well of you. If it did well while you were gone, that means you have put some really good people in place and you've built into the culture and you've established values and yeah, it's moving forward. That should encourage you, not discourage you. That should make you feel great, not insecure, because that means you've done a great job. So, I don't remember what the question was now, but
how do you know when?
How do you know when it's time? That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. You got anything, Ellis?
With the scripture we read together here, Moses acknowledged his limitations. Even, he was 120 years old, but that was part of what he said to the people. I can no longer.
Yes.
So being honest with where we're at, honest when the grace is wearing thin, getting a clear word from the Lord. Sometimes
Absolutely.
the Lord just clearly says it's time.
Got to have that.
And all the other indicators might show that everything's going great. Why now? But the word of the Lord, we walk in obedience. It's not our church. All those things that you already said are important. And yeah, when the vision, when it becomes harder and harder to come up with fresh vision for the next year, there's something wearing thin there.
Yeah.
And we just need to make room for the next generation. Just stay aware of that. Where is the next generation stepping into leadership, and we're giving them authority and we're giving them room. There comes a time we need to step aside. That doesn't mean we have to step out.
Right.
But step aside.
Right.
And there's a question that comes up here. Does successful succession mean that the former pastor should stay in the church? If successful, does that mean I stay, or should the outgoing pastor leave?
I really think that depends on the situation, honestly. In my case, I'm staying. I like to say Susan and I are going to be in the family, just not leading the family anymore. So we're continuing there. That's not always, sometimes God calls you to something completely different, or calls you to a different location or to something else. So it really depends on the situation and what the circumstances are and what you're stepping into. Are you stepping into something else? Are you just retiring? Or, all those factors are at play. If you're retiring, you may want to go move to where your kids are or something, or who knows? The key to me is not about do you stay in the church or not. The key to successful succession, in my mind, is keeping the relationships as healthy as they possibly can be. Like, are we good? Am I leaving because we're a mess? Like, because we got all these relational friction or unresolved conflict? Well, if that's the case, let's deal with that and then talk about succession. That's my perspective. Um, but if the relationships are healthy, then there's all kinds of different variations of what you're stepping into next. Whether it's part of that church or not, or in that same location or not, or it's a totally, I know a guy who founded a church near us, became this gigantic mega church, and then he got called to the mission field. So no, he's not there. He's in missions and handed off to the church to the next generation. And so it just depends on the circumstances and what your call is, I think, whether you stay or not. Let me say one other thing about that, Lester. I think what is really important beyond just the relationships, though, is if you're going to stay, defining what your role is. There has to be really, really clear definition about what your role is, because if you're the founder in particular and you stay and there's not clear definition about what your role is, it's going to get muddy real fast. Because everybody's looking at your face. I mean, let's be real. You're sitting out in the congregation and something's happening on the platform and everybody's kind of side-eyeing, looking over, I wonder what Keith thinks about that, or what Lester thinks. I wonder what, and so what is your role? Very clearly, do you have a leadership role still, or are you just a neighbor, so to speak? That's some of the language that we've used. Like I've stepped into the neighbor role. I'm here. I'm part of the church, but I'm not on staff in any way, shape, or form. And so that means some really important things for me. Like when I don't agree with something, how do I deal with that? Well, I'm certainly not going to go talk to my buddies at the church who aren't on staff or on the leadership team and tell them all the things I think about why they ought to do something different. That's a recipe for absolute disaster, because as the founder, you have immeasurable influence with the people who are there, who are still there, who are under your tenure. And you have to be very, very clear with yourself, with God, with your spouse, and with the leadership about what your role is and how you're going to function in that space. And so, if you're going to stay on staff, well, what does that look like in staff meetings, for example? That needs to be clarified. Because when you're in the staff meeting, even if you're not leading it, people are wondering what you're thinking. And they're wondering how you're going to respond to this. And the person who's leading is wondering what you're thinking and how you're responding to this. And so, how am I going to respond to those things? And when I don't agree with something, who do I talk to? Because if you even, as the founder, and you're in a staff meeting, especially early on after your transition, if you ask a clarifying question, it sounds like you disagree. That's how people receive that. So I don't ask questions, even now, because I'm still on staff, but I'm actually not leading right now. That executive team I was talking about has been leading since July, so I'm still there. I don't have an office anymore, but I'm still there. And so when I'm in a meeting and I don't agree with something, I keep my poker face on. And after the meeting, I have a private conversation with those guys to say, hey, can we talk about X, whatever it was, and why did you guys, can you help me understand why we're doing this? And that has happened like once, but it happens. And so defining what your role is and how you're going to function in that space is really important for that succession to be successful.
So after November 2nd, you're no longer staff.
Right.
Do you still see yourself giving input into the vision, the direction of the church, or have you totally released that and you're just a neighbor?
Only in the sense of oversight. So the church will be part of our network.
Okay.
So I'll be doing oversight for the church. So in that sense, I will
sense.
be, but not as a staff member.
During this past week, one of the questions came up as we were talking about succession was, how do you help your wife transition and the relationship with your wife and the new First Lady?
Yeah. Well, we've been having lunches as couples on a regular basis this whole year. We already had a relationship, but just making sure that they're good because your spouse can blow this thing up.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely. The spouse can blow this thing up. So it was critically important for us to have mentors and oversight people who were speaking into us as a couple in this process to make sure that Susan and I were on the same page, and that it's not enough for me to make sure Susan and I are on the same page. Everybody with me? Because your perspective of your spouse and somebody else's perspective of your spouse is oftentimes quite different. So we needed somebody from the outside objective to make sure that her and I were on the same page. We both are hearing Jesus, that we are going to release this, and what role my role is going to be. And we're both in agreement with that. And if we're not ready. That's the way we operated with it. Because if she's not ready, which by the way she was ready way before me, but if she's not ready, it's going to get real weird and awkward for everybody. And I've seen it. It's an absolute disaster when the spouse is not on the same page and you're going to make a transition like this. I mean, it can wreak havoc in the organization. So it's a great follow-up. Yeah, you got to be on the same page. And you are not enough to determine that. You need some people outside of you to help you determine that as a couple. Does that make sense what I'm saying? It's a big deal. So it sounds like you might have some experience with that. Yeah, I actually knew of a situation where that happened, where in this case it was a wife. The wife wasn't on the same page as the senior leader, and she literally sabotaged the entire succession. And the church just almost disintegrated because it was just a mess. So it's vitally important that you and your spouse are united because it's emotional. It's super emotional, and you are completely subjective in that process. Like one of the things I didn't talk about in that talk was this guy that we have who did his doctoral thesis on founder transitions. I was like, so how do we get in the 10%? He goes, well, one of the reasons that founder transitions go so poorly is because the founder leads the transition. And the reason that's such a struggle is because you're not objective as the founder. This is your baby, right? I mean, again, it's not yours, but it kind of, you know what I'm saying? That's that tension. And so as a founder, you need somebody objective outside of yourself, that has authority to speak. This is why oversight is one of the reasons oversight is such a big deal. Because as a founder, you're thinking, this was my thinking, this is the biggest thing we've done since we started the church. It is absolutely the biggest thing we've done. It's bigger than building buildings. It's bigger than going to multiple services. It's bigger than all these things. It's the biggest thing that we've done. So of course I'm going to lead it. I mean, of course. I'm the leader. So of course I'm going to lead it. And my oversight came in and said, no, you're not. and I was like, why? And because you're not objective. You're in it. This is your thing. And I am so thankful, you guys, I did not lead my transition because I would have blown it to smithereens. because there were moments I was absolutely freaking out in my head and thinking totally upside down things. And we just need that, all of us. None of us are omniscient. There's only one omniscient one. That's not you and it's not me. We need other people speaking in to help us because it's so emotional. And it's emotional for your team. They need that outside voice too to help them process it all and work through their emotions and work through their grief and all the things. That's why we took a year with our elder team before we ever shared publicly about this transition. It took a year for our elder team to all get on board and get through their emotions and their grief and all the things that they were processing. So, yeah.
That's good. That's actually a confirmation. I know we recommend having an outside consultant come in and work with you, or your overseer. And Al and I were just re-looking at our whole process, and one of the things that we have been writing down as some guidelines is that the overseer is in charge of the transition, succession, not the lead pastor.
Exactly.
And so we're learning as we go, and so that's a confirmation of
That's
what
great.
we were sensing as well.
That's great.
Time for one more. I didn't get to all of them. You'll have to talk to him personally, or some of
Yes,
this.
let's talk.
Some of this might flow over into our afternoon session. We'll have a Q&A time as well. How can I make space to new leaders? I have new youth pastors and a new associate pastor, but what does that look like? How do you make room? We're talking about bringing in the next generation, younger leaders. What are some ways that we can make room?
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about this a little bit this afternoon, but one of the ways that we make room for people is giving them decision-making power. Like if you say, I'm going to give you a position, I'm going to give you space, if they don't have the freedom to make decisions without your approval, they don't really have freedom and they don't really have authority. So, and you know, that's limited. You don't give them freedom to make any decision they want to make, but there has to be some openness to say, you know what, this is your baby. And here's the mission, vision, and values of our church. And as long as you're within those parameters in your area here, you can make decisions. And, you know, sometimes you're going to make mistakes. And when you make a mistake, we'll have a conversation about that, and we'll talk about how do we correct that and all that. But if people coming behind you don't have the freedom to make real life decisions, then they aren't really being empowered. They're just your minions. They're just your puppets. That's not leadership. That's not developing leaders. Developing leaders is when you actually take a risk and give them authority to make some decisions. And that means you're going to have some messes to clean up. Okay? I'm not pretending that it all is wonderful and glorious when you do that. But think about Jesus. And, you know, when he left, he was like, okay, Peter and the gang, you're in charge of the future of the world. Yeah. Anyway, I don't have that much faith, but but you get the idea. We've got to give people freedom to make mistakes, and we got to give people freedom to actually make decisions that matter. And to the degree that people have freedom to make decisions that matter, they are empowered. To the degree that they don't, they are disempowered. So that's one of the primary ways that we empower the next generation.
And to do that, it's important to have a grace-oriented culture in the church.
Absolutely.
If it's all rule-based, it's hard.
Yeah.
But it's a grace-based. It's okay to make mistakes here.
Yeah.
And we'll work together. We'll clean up together whatever messes there are. But there's parameters, you know. I'm not
Yes.
saying no parameters, but a grace-based culture just brings so much freedom, and it's so much easier to raise up leaders in that kind of culture.
Yes, and I will say one other thing to that. I mentioned it earlier. I want to say it again. All that's true, but if you have a leader who keeps making the same mistake over and over and over again, then you do need to limit their decision-making opportunities. Okay, it's not a free-for-all, you know. You can't do whatever you want. Here's our mission, vision, and values. You got to stay within those fences, and you start making mistakes outside of that. You keep making the same mistake over and over and over again, I'm going to pull you back because I can't trust you. And if that continues, that may mean they're not in that position anymore. They may be opting out because a lot of times what's going on there, I find, is it's not someone being malicious, it's they have a different value system they're operating out of, which is not good or bad. It's just, but these are our values. So if you want to be part of this, we're operating with these values, and when you keep doing this, it's working against those values. So you either can get in line with these values, or if you want to do that different, that's fine. Then you're opting out, and man, God bless you. And I'm not saying you're a bad person. I'm just saying this is who we are. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, well said. And I smell Chick-fil-A. So in about 10 minutes, make your way over to the cafe area. You can go out around this way or through this door, through the gymnasium, and then turn left, and the cafe is right down there. So again, if you have your meal ticket in your name tag here, so just take that along with you, and we'll gather back here again at, Jody, what time does it say there? 1:30. Okay, we'll come back here again at 1:30. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.